the decision before the decision, which is the triage. How do you make decisions? How do you categorize what's important or what's not? How do you say no to things? How do you say yes to things? And I've learned, different tricks and tools along the way. Welcome to the Dirt Podcasts. I'm Miles Solomon. Every week, I share my perspective on commercial real estate and the business of trading dirt. Let's get into it.
Nothing in this podcast is legal, tax, or investment advice. It's for entertainment only, loosely inspired by real estate, and any resemblance to actual people, deals, or outcomes is accidental or aggressively fictionalized. Talk to your attorney, CPA, and advisors before acting on anything you hear.
All righty. Happy wartime. We're a wartime economy again. Wow. Lots happened since my last podcast. And I'm excited to report we are on the brink of apparently all-out war with Iran. Man, fuel prices have never been higher, huh? Woo-wee. It's probably the best thing to happen in California politics I could imagine. That's the silver lining I keep focusing on. When you're paying $6.50 a gallon, I guess people could blame it on the war in Iran, but the rest of the country, even high fuel prices are like $4 a gallon. So that extra $2 of California state tax is really hurting right now. And I'm curious to see what effect. Is it possible that the state could flip? Probably not likely, but it's a fun fantasy to have. Look, I'm not going to really get into politics here, but I will say there's a lot of hoopla about Iran and this war and Trump, A couple observations. One is I'm impressed by how good what is that? Like, not counterintelligence, but cyber warfare is online from Iran and Russia and China, trying to stoke dissent within the U.S. It's crazy how much manipulation there's going on social media, on news websites, things like that. Half of the comments, I would say, on Reddit, Instagram, Facebook are bots by one of those countries. And I think that's pretty impressive. I've noticed that because, realistically, are we really advocating for Iran? We've been in a quiet war with Iran for, 20, 30 years. They were the largest proponent of our competitors in Iraq and Afghanistan. Their sphere of influence, the Iranian Republic or Iranian, what do they call them, guards, have been supplying IEDs in Iraq and Afghanistan for 20 plus years. They've been killing American soldiers for longer than that. So this whole thing, we didn't just start a war with Iran. We've been at war with Iran. And I'll just kind of leave that at that. But it is interesting and potentially good. Another silver lining, potentially good for West Coast logistics. It should lead to an increase of bulk commodities from other places coming through, I think, the West Coast of the U.S. It just cuts down one more path of potential East Coast, Gulf of Mexico kind of imports. So, again, I guess it's not a very nice thing to say when you're about to be at war and a bunch of civilians are about to die, and it is terrible. But I'm looking for some silver linings, and I think I may have found a couple tenuous ones. Meanwhile, I've been up at the ranch doing cowboy things. I've been learning more about road building than I think I ever wanted to know. It's funny when you learn something, how, for example, you learn about a new car or some special fact about a car or something that you didn't know was a valuable car or a collector's car, and then you start seeing that car everywhere. It's amazing when you give attention to something, how all of a sudden your brain kind of rewires the world to see that thing. And I've been seeing that with roads everywhere right now. So we have a huge road, a couple miles, that we have to figure out how to make it an all-season road. And I've been reading books on kind of civil engineering and road building. And now every road I look at, I'm looking at drainage and how water gets off of it, how they have built their drainage infrastructure and their culverts and their ditches and bridges and things like that. And it's like, I'll never look at roads the same. The same thing happened to me when I got into commercial real estate, where, all these buildings that I previously never really looked at, all of a sudden you're looking at each one and thinking about, who owns that one? What's inside that one? What kind of business? And you just see the world differently. I think that's a funny thing the human brain does. And I've been going through it with roads, which unfortunately is not very interesting and probably not going to have much application the rest of my life. But at this time, I'm trying to become a amateur road building civil engineer. And it's actually hilarious because there's one guy up at the ranch. There's about 8 properties up there that go up this hill. And there's one guy that really maintains them. And every year he takes his bulldozer and he goes and cuts a new road. And during the winter, it's like almost impassable. He goes up in like a little Willie Jeep, and it is sketchy. And so he's a pretty, crotchety old guy. Doesn't really like people from other places. I can tell he definitely doesn't like me. But I've been gently, nicely trying to kind of meet with him and talk to him. And I've been kind of passively suggesting that, I'm planning on put some money in and bring some machinery. And, I know that road's your baby, but I had some ideas about the modern miracle gift of science. And, would you be open to doing this, that, and the other? And every time I talk to him, he's like, no, it won't work. There's no point. Until we put asphalt or concrete on that road, there's no point in doing anything. And I'm like, whoa, there's like tens of thousands of miles of roads around the U.S. that are all season roads that don't have asphalt or concrete. Like, clearly it can be done. So I keep kind of trying to subtly, suggest things, or, hey, I'm going to be doing this. And I can just tell it's going to be an issue already. Because it's a 1-lane road. It goes up 2 miles. He goes up there every couple of days. So when we're working on the road, I blocked the road that first weekend when we got the trailer stuck for like 5 minutes, and I could tell he was going to lose it. So when we have giant excavators on the road building culverts and ditches, it'd be a miracle if we don't get into some kind of altercation. But that's ranch life in the update. I had a weird weekend up there a couple weeks ago. As I mentioned, I've got this acidity thing that I've been dealing with. So I knew we were going to have a couple bottles of wine. We were playing bocce ball. We're hanging out. And I go inside and I grab my acid pills, and I take one of my acid pills. And we go back and we're playing bocce, and I'm drinking wine. And about 30, 40 minutes later, I start to feel really weird. Like, my head is like kind of buzzing a little bit, and my body's like a little tingling. I'm like, this is just strange. And it came out of nowhere. And so I go and I sit down, and I'm like kind of thinking about it. And I'm like, I have no idea what's going on. In my mind, I'm like, did I like step on something that poisoned me? And then I go, oh, maybe my girlfriend dosed me with something. She's never done that, but maybe this weekend's her first. So I go in and I say, hey, you didn't I have to be really gentle about it. I'm like, you didn't dose me with anything, did you? Like mushrooms or something like that? And she's like, no, I didn't dose you. Like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, okay, good. Just making sure. And I go back outside, I sit down, and she's cooking dinner, and I'm like, God, what the hell is going on? And then I realize, I'm like, oh shit. It's like we had gone to a concert, or I think it was from even before that. I'd gone to Miami on a trip with some friends, and in my acid container, I had put MDMA pills next to my acid pills, and they were the same color, same shape, but my acid pills were a bit bigger, like 50% bigger than my MDMA pills. And I had accidentally dosed myself with Molly on like a Sunday evening as I'm just hanging out playing bocce ball, and I realized that, and I'm like, oh my God, I've never been dosed. It's a different feeling when you do it on accident. Certainly a different high. So I ran and I told her, I said, oh my God, I drugged myself. And she's like, what? And I told her what happened. And she goes, oh, I want one. So we spent the rest of the evening drinking wine in the bathtub outside and just hanging out. And that was a hilarious, I got to be more careful about, I guess, mixing things. But that was the ranch. We're going to go back up, not going to do any drugs. But we're going to go back up this weekend. We're hosting our first group of friends there. I got the machinery up there, and we're working on some different stuff. And I'm doing like a little prototype of what I'm going to do for the road on our little roads through the property, which has been fun. And brokerage, we're busy. We're getting calls. There's a lot of activity. I don't know about a lot of deals. We get like comp reports every week that our office puts together of everything that's land, building that have sold or leased in the last week, and I'm kind of going through those. And you definitely see deals here and there, but and there is transaction volume. I think it's increasing, but it's still way below what it was a few years ago. And it's funny because I keep getting these kind of interactions with clients that I haven't done a deal with for a few years that are coming up, and they're like, hey, we need help, we want to do something. And I keep having to do the same spiel where I'm like, just so you know, the world has changed a lot since the last time that we were talking about doing a deal. And it's happened like 3 times now where I'm providing our broker opinion of values to people, and I'm like prefacing it saying like, just so you know, like they're going to be 30-40% off what they were 3-4 years ago. And I think people have been understanding of it, but also, especially people that aren't like real clients, have definitely gone and got second and third opinions from people who, have, like you do. But I know that I didn't get a couple of listings because my numbers were lower than the people who I was competing with against. And I have no problem with that. I mean, at this point, I'd rather just not get a listing. I have enough to handle and deal with. I'm spending well over 10 grand a month probably on marketing, I would guess, on the listings that we have. And, I'd rather just not have a new listing if the owner's not going to be realistic about pricing and they're not motivated. It's just not worth the time. But with all that activity, it got me thinking about just the business of brokerage and how do you deal with a lot of activity. We had a guy that's been with our team for a long time, like 3-4 years, that left a couple weeks ago, or about a week ago, RIP. And he's going into different business. And, I called him when I found out and I talked to him about it. And in my mind, I was like, you've already been through the worst part. The first couple of years, figuring out where things are, what things are, that's the worst part of the business. Because you're so clueless and the learning curve is so steep, and the cycles to get clients takes a long time. And to do deals. There's guys that come out. There's another guy in our office that did like a $20 million deal in his first year, and that happens. But even then, like, you learn that it still takes a long time after that to get new cycles for new deals going. I've talked about it before, but there's deals I've been working on for years. There's active deals that have been, I've got a listing that we basically have been kind of going back and forth with the buyer and the seller, and mainly it's the seller dragging his feet, but we're going on like 8 months that we've had an active purchase and sale agreement and haven't been able to make a deal. And so I think the guy that left, he was just tired of those long timelines. And, even though when you do make a deal, sometimes you make a lot of money, I think he was tired of like just the instability of it and the lack of, at the end of the day, nothing's guaranteed. And he was noticing that, if he skipped out or skimped on work, there was nothing there. There's not a lot of recurrent revenue in the business. And even repeat customers, it's a lot of work to, even if you have a repeat customer, it's a lot of work to turn that into a deal. And so I think, it's obviously, I've talked about it a lot of times before. I did like an informational call with a friend of a friend who called me, and I'd never spoken to him before. And I said, hey, you mind if I record this? We're in the middle of recording a podcast. And he asked me not to record it, or he was fine with me recording it. He asked me afterwards not to release it until he figures out what he's doing. But I said a lot of things on that podcast, which I'll say again, which is like, this is a tough business. And, I feel like if you can make it past the first couple of years and you start to get a hang of it, it becomes a mental game. It's a mental game for everybody. You either have to be crazy or dumb or just wired differently, or you have to rewire your mind. And to do that, there's, I think, a lot of tricks and tools and habits that you have to form. And of that, as activity comes back and it gets a lot busier, I think the most important, and I don't know if this is I don't think it's brokerage alone, and I don't even think it's just sales alone. I think business in general, the number one thing that you have to be good at, is time management and like triaging, like a nurse in a hospital. You have to know how to allocate your time and energy. I think that's the number one most important thing. And there's so many facets to that, and that could probably be a much longer conversation of, what exactly time management looks like and how do you break out your day. And there's a lot of different philosophies of, I know there's guys in the office that block 3 hours a day, every day, no matter what, and they cold call, and that's great. And there's guys that, they just have different rules for how they do their time management, and that works for them. And each of it's kind of different, but they're all revolving around this concept of time management and it being important. And, the detail within the broader category of time management is triaging and being able to determine when you have, I don't know how many decisions a month. I think I probably have probably 1,000 decisions a month, small and big, that I have to make. Maybe I'll calculate that one day and figure out what the exact, I'm just spitballing here, but like I'm guessing, it's probably around 1,000 between small things, whether it's wording, phrases, and big things. It's probably around 1,000 decisions a day, or 1,000 decisions a month. And if that's 30 days, what is that? 30 decisions a day. That sounds low even. It's probably more than that. But when you are dealing with thousands of decisions, how do you decide what matters and how you're going to deal with it? And a lot of people are not good at this. Even really successful brokers and businessmen are not good at it. And I'm definitely not perfect at it. But I have noticed a quality of really great business people is being really great at the decision before the decision, which is the triage. How do you make decisions? How do you categorize what's important or what's not? How do you say no to things? How do you say yes to things? And I've learned, different tricks and tools along the way. I think that, as a general rule, when you're making plans, if I think about like, if this plan were tomorrow, would I be excited to go or would I want to go for like extracurricular stuff? Bringing it forward. So it's a lot easier to say yes to something that's in a month or 2 months than if it were tomorrow and you really are like getting ready to go to the thing. So I think for like kind of events and extracurriculars, that's been a good way of like, okay, if this thing were tomorrow, would I want to go? And if the answer is no, then I say no to that thing. So obviously, having the capacity and skill set to say no to things is a big part. And there are people that take that to extremes and they say no to everything that's not aligned with, I'm not that person either. But I just kind of use that little hack. But more than that, I think that how you decide what matters and how you're going to deal with it, what I'm calling triaging, comes down to a couple questions. And basically every time you have a decision to make, you have an opportunity to ruminate on something. And that's where you're just thinking about the thing, but you're not necessarily doing anything about it. And sometimes there's value in ruminating and thinking about things. You brainstorm, even just thinking about it for a little bit and then coming back to it it's clicking in your head, and then later on you come up with like a better idea of how, or a solution, but a lot of things that people end up ruminating or thinking about or entertaining with their brain space are not good things or are not important things. And it is a mental decision, regardless of whatever the decision is. The decision before the decision is a mental decision. Am I going to think about this thing? Am I going to decide about this thing? I think is a decision in itself. And getting really good at that pre-decision, is this thing worth my time? Is this worth my energy? That's really important. It doesn't always need to be an actual decision in the real world. Just a decision to think about a thing is qualifying enough that you need to categorize it and have a system for how you deal with that. And so, I basically ask two questions, I think, when I come up with most issues or most decisions is it important? That's the first question I ask. Like, is this important? Is this something I need to spend time on? Is this something worth spending time on? That's the first question I ask. And then, can I easily do something to control the outcome of this decision or this thing, whatever it is? Because, that's a big part of it too. Like, a lot of these decisions that you're faced with are not real decisions. People love to talk about and contemplate and ruminate about decisions that aren't real decisions. And it happens in deal making all the time where people go, for example, we get a lease offer and it's from a group that maybe their financials are not as great, or maybe the price is not as great, and they start talking about it and wondering, should I do this deal? Should we make this deal? Is this the type of person I want to lease it out to? And those are, they may be valid questions. So it's important, but can I do something about the outcome? And I guess a caveat to that is like, is it actionable right now? And a lot of times, when you get an offer for a property, for example, you're not deciding whether you're going to do that deal or not. There's a long way between that and the lease. So, sometimes they're like false decisions. You're not really, until you're signing on the dotted line, it's not a real decision. So going back to the first question, is it important? And if it's important, how important is it? And categorizing it based on that. Is it important and is it urgent? And how urgent is it? And I think that's a good way of like dealing with inbound and things that come from you. How to deal with decisions is like, how important is it? How do I categorize it? And you need to come up with your own framework, obviously, for doing that. But I think it's important to have, it goes back to your values and it goes back to how you want to spend your time. But if you have a strong framework for your values and your time, you just need to make them align with your decision making. Most people have strong opinions of their values and their beliefs. So it's just about making that agree with how you categorize something as important. Is this something I want to spend time on? And when the answer is no, then you don't push that off to tomorrow or we'll deal with it next week. It's just, no, I'm not going to deal with that. It's not even going to go on the board as something that I have to decide ever. I'm just not going to deal with it. And again, having values and a structure of your beliefs helps you decide that. And, that's a bigger task, but I think, simply put, like, is this something I want to work on, or is this something that's valuable for my business or my personal life? Simple questions like that. And then, is this thing important or not? Because there's definitely a tendency in like the sales world and brokerage world to like say yes to everything. And, there's sales guys, so outgoing and, want to make things work and, agreeable people. And what happens is a lot of people get like way too overstretched and their commitment and their quality is just low because they say yes to too many things. They're constantly overstretched. And the work product and just them as a person is like kind of a lower, not as serious as a person, I think, because they don't know how to categorize things and treat it with the attention that that thing needs. So, that's the first question. Is it important? How important is it? And then, can I control the outcome of this thing? Is there truly a decision to be made right now on this, or does it need to be flushed out more? And if it needs to be flushed out more, then you just need to do the work. There's no real decisions to be made. Just do the work, keep negotiating the deal until there's something actually to be decided on. An LOI by itself, owners love to say, oh, I got an offer for $3 million or $4 million last year, whatever. You can offer anything that's like meaningless. You didn't have a deal to make. It was never yours to make until you really got to a point where the contract was like ready to be signed. So, if there's a chance that this is like an important thing to you or an important deal, you need to get it to the point that it's actionable. And there's no point in talking about it or discussing it or whatever, because there's nothing to be done. And this isn't fully fleshed out. It needs to be negotiated more. We need to get to at least to a point where we agree on terms and stuff. Then you can decide. And so I think, a lot of the time wasting stuff in our business is that ruminating and that fake decision making that's not really based on a real decision. And so, if I can control the outcome of the thing, so assuming that something that I do need to make a decision on, it's important, and I can control the outcome, what are the immediate steps I need to take to, how do you break down the task? How do you, and that's based on, I think, the urgency of it. And, if you could break it down right away, and these are the things I need to do that, when you look at all the tasks and the subtasks and you go, okay, that's a project for a later day, or that's a project for right now, you can make that decision. And, obviously if it's urgent, then it's going to the top of the pile. But I do think it's a skill that you have to work on. And to the colleague that left, I think it's a skill that, he could have worked a lot harder on, because I know he was overwhelmed a lot and underwhelmed at other points. And it's because that time management and kind of categorizing of tasks and people and activities and clients, he didn't have a good framework to deal with those things. And, when you have a framework, it takes the decision-making out of a lot of this stuff. You're just following a structure. You're following a rubric. And it's important to, there's days that I get home and, I get home at 6:30 or 7, or, if it's a long day later, and I'm just exhausted from all the decision-making. And, just come home as like a zombie from the decision-making and from talking to people all day and, just working all the time. But, I don't look at that as a success. I think a successful day is you follow kind of a structure and a plan in terms of how you make your decisions, and you take out most of that mental energy for dealing with all these different things. And you're just doing the work. You're not having to make decisions about each one of these things, or you make less decisions. You're always going to have to decide. But I don't see as like, I remember when I studied abroad in France for a year, I remember there was this Swiss guy there, and he was talking about how Americans love to talk about how busy they are and how much work they have. And they show up late to home, or they go on vacation and they still have work to do. And he was saying that that's a sign of someone that doesn't know how to do real work and how to make decisions and get shit done. If you're still on the phone, or you go to do something that's supposed to be, just personal or whatever, and you're still doing, you're still working and you're still doing all these other things. And I think that comes off as like really preachy. It's like, yeah, that's the world. Like there's always stuff going on. Unfortunately we can't all be lazy Europeans. But I think there's some truth in that too, where, being extremely busy and doing late nights all the time and working at the weekends and working on trips is not necessarily a reflection of like that you're a busy, hard worker. It's that like, I think to some extent you can't get your shit done in like a timely manner. And so it drags over into the rest of your life. And, I'm not saying I live like that. I definitely am on vacation, on the phone, on email, at the weekends, et cetera. But It's a skill that I try to practice. And I don't necessarily think it's like, there's guys in this office that will talk all day about how good it is to work 15 hours a day. And, even though I've done that many, many days, I don't necessarily look at that as like a badge of honor or as like, that's a good thing. If I were more effective with my time management and with getting shit done, I wouldn't need to work 15 hours a day. And my girlfriend's been very encouraging of that, as partners are. But I do think there's truth to it, that like, good time management and good decision making gives you more free time in the rest of the time. And there's nothing I hate more than when I'm getting ready to go on a trip and I still have all these things that haven't been done. Some of it's out of your control, but a lot of times these are things that I should have done earlier or gotten done quicker or faster, and communicated that. That's why when we do this trip every year for 2 weeks where we go off the grid, I don't leave myself the excuse for, well, I should have done this thing or that thing. I talked about that story when we were out in the woods and I was on my satellite trying to find signal so we could close this deal. Like, that was a failure on my part for sure. Funny story, but a failure. That stuff should be buttoned up and done before. And there's no excuse for it, really. So, that was poor planning, that we didn't get a deal sooner in the year, that we didn't get further along. We did everything we could, but not really. Like, of course, not really. If I'm still in the woods riding my bike around in one of the most beautiful areas in the world looking for a fucking satellite in the sky, that's not a successful time management plan. And I think long term, unless you're like a robot, like some brokers are, or all you care about is money and business, and that's the only thing you care about. If you're a normal person, you have other values and things that you also care about. Really good time management and a framework for making decisions is important, and it's something I want to spend more time thinking about and focusing on. And these are just kind of the skills that I've developed so far, but I think there are a lot of other people that are way better at it, and I plan to learn more and share that here. But for now, the only decision I've got to make is how much beer I'm going to buy tomorrow for the ranch this weekend.